After Father replaced the previous director, Freminet's thoughts began to turn to finding his mother once again. At first, Freminet assumed that he would rile up a still greater storm of brutality, for he knew that her methods were brutal, and he expected new orders to be given just as pitiless as they had been in the past. But he soon discovered that Father's way of doing things was utterly different. With Father, the home was a place of refuge for all the family's children, and as such, required a collective effort to maintain. It was up to each of them to complete their task in a way that best suited them. Even if they failed, they wouldn't be subjected to the searingly painful punishments there had been previously. This taste of freedom finally gave Freminet a chance to breathe deeply, and he started searching for his mother's whereabouts in his free time. But a long time passed and he still wasn't any closer to finding her. Perhaps I really was abandoned, Freminet thought, trying to convince himself to accept reality as he strained to summon the already vague memory of his mother's face. But just as he was thinking of giving up, Father threw him a pendant. I found this at the base of operations of those scum. Keep it, said Father. Freminet looked back at her, perplexed, which in turn seemed to confuse her. What is it? I'm talking about those unserious scoundrels. It belonged to your mother. She frowned, suddenly seeming to realize something. What were you told about her? Freminet told her what the previous director had said to him, about how he had been abandoned. As he did so, she said nothing, but her eyes began to burn with wrath. After Freminet was finished, Father fell silent for a rare moment. Do you want to know what really happened? She asked, fixing him with a piercing stare. Freminet nodded almost unconsciously, but once he had heard what she had to say, he wasn't sure which story he'd rather believe. Father told Freminet that his mother hadn't abandoned him, but on the contrary, had acted to protect him. That year, the debt that his family owed finally reached the point that they would no longer be able to repay it. Those greedy moneylenders had not only forced Freminet's mother to hand over the house that they lived in, but had also demanded that she hand over Freminet as well. But she was his mother. How could she let this happen? In the end, she had no choice but to entrust Freminet to that orphanage, somewhere that could never get at him, and then face them alone. This was all I found. As for your mother, as she looked at the young boy in front of her, still gripping the pendant tightly in his hands, Father trailed off and left the ensuing silence to speak for her. Freminet's head hung low, but knowing his personality, Father slipped out of the room without another word. The boy was left standing there, shaking as he gazed down at the pendant in his hands. It had long since rusted and could no longer produce sounds, and the clockwork components seemed to have been stained dark brown by dried blood. She must have been holding it at the very end, he thought. In his despair, Freminet continued to stare at the pendant, desperately looking for even a threat of his mother's warmth. That evening, Freminet dived down to the bottom of the ocean and let it all out. He couldn't remember the last time he cried like this. Other than the Rue Maritime flowers that wept alongside him, not a soul heard the sound of his sobbing, for the ocean smothered it utterly. From that day on, his grip on his greatsword tightened. He made an oath to himself that he would never again let another member of his family meet with misfortune.